Senator Rand Paul joins us tonight. He intends to join Democrats if the White House moves any further on this with Venezuela and strikes inside the nation, the communist nation of Venezuela. He's with us tonight. Senator, good to see you again. You're joining with some some interesting people that are not very favorable to the president, and obviously people that are very, I think, hypocritical when it comes to these kinds of policies. Tell us why.
You know, I look at it as joining with the Constitution. The Constitution is pretty clear that war only occurs when Congress votes on it. We also have very clear rules in our country that say that when someone is out of combat or has been bombed into submission, if they're clinging from the wreckage of a boat, if they are shipwrecked, if they're hanging from a parachute and they're helpless, that they are no longer in combat and are not eligible to be killed. So there are some real questions here. If first strike was ordered, there's a question whether those people were in combat, whether they were armed or what they were doing that made them combatants. But there's an even more in question, someone who is shipwrecked, someone who's clinging to wreckage, whether they can be killed. It appears to me that people who have previously been very supportive of the bombing, such as Lindsey Graham, the Wall Street Journal, and others, are now saying that clearly we're not allowed to bomb people who are shipwrecked. So I think the proof is in the details, and we should see the videos, and we should hear from them. And I actually don't like sort of pinning the blame on the military. They have a tough job as it is. I think if there is blame to go around here, if someone bombed someone who was shipwrecked, that should go to the person who created the policy, not necessarily the soldier who's trying to do his job.
Yeah, well, we'll see where all of this goes with the shipwreck. I want to talk more broadly about Venezuela in general. The president and Maduro spoke over the phone last week. Miami Herald got a lot of the information of that, saying that Trump told Maduro, you can save yourself and those closest to you, but you must leave the country now. Reuters reporting that Maduro has suggested that he would get full amnesty and removal of sanctions if he were to leave. Trump didn't like that. You're out against this war fully. I think the broader GOP is more with the president on this. Let me just ask you this, though. If he can force Maduro to leave and do it without actually striking inside Venezuela, I feel like that would be considered a net gain. If we're actually trying to get rid of the Chinese influence in Latin America, if we're actually trying to move communism, off of being so close to our shores, why would that be necessarily a bad thing? It's pretty clear the president doesn't want to start a war, and he's trying to use every lever he can to get this guy out without doing that. Would that be such a bad thing?
If we're looking at degrees of evil, there's a lot of evil in the world. Should we use that kind of force to get rid of President Xi from China? Should we use that kind of force to get rid of a half a dozen tin-pot dictators around the world? There's a lot of authoritarianism. There's a lot of socialism that I object to. I wrote a book called The Case Against Socialism, describing how awful the socialism is in Venezuela. But that doesn't mean that regime change always works or is a good idea. The president, one of the reasons I've always supported President Trump is that he was one who was opposed to the regime change in Iraq. He was one that was also opposed to the regime change in Libya. Right. And those led to disasters and decades of war and trillions of U.S. dollars. So I'm not for war, and if you have to have war, it should be done in a constitutional fashion. It should go to Congress, and Congress should declare the war.
And I understand that. Why do you think that changed with him, though? I mean, and I got 20 seconds because I want to get to healthcare with you, but why do you think he suddenly is pushing? He's obviously trying to push Maduro out.
Marco Rubio. I think Marco Rubio's always wanted to have regime change in Venezuela, and I think he's giving him bad advice.
Giving him bad advice. Okay. Interesting summation of that, and I don't disagree that might be what's happening, because something clearly has changed. Somebody that was never a pro-war guy, and then suddenly this is interesting. I don't necessarily disagree with him because I see the evil of that of what Maduro has done too, but it is interesting. I want to pivot and talk about healthcare before I let you go, though. Politico says the Senate is barreling toward failure on health care is a headline that came out this week. You've got a plan to combine two different bills, Health Savings Account for All and the Health Marketplace for All Act. You say it takes on insurance companies as the president has called for. Everybody's trying to figure out how we're going to replace Obamacare. We've complained about it forever. Tell us your plan.
So we shouldn't take the Obamacare subsidies and just give them to people to put in their health savings accounts. That's just a continuation of Obamacare Light. Won't bring prices down at all. In fact, health care premiums will continue to go through the roof. My plan legalizes the ability for an individual to go on Amazon or Costco or Sam's Club and use them as a purchasing agent for their insurance. Be like joining a collective or a co-op where they come together and they use the size and leverage to negotiate lower prices. Costco's got like 44 million members. What if you joined them and one person at Costco negotiated with United Healthcare or with Blue Cross? I think they would be able to negotiate rates down. So my plan would negotiate rates down. I would also let everybody have an HSA. Currently, only about 10% of people have an HSA. I had 3 kids go through braces, orthodontics. They're incredibly expensive, but it was a lot better for me than people who don't have an HSA. I've always had an HSA, so I was able to fund 3 kids' braces through that. Every American should have that privilege that I was able to have, and we shouldn't limit HSAs. Everybody should get one. You should be allowed to have a gym membership. You should allow to be buy vitamins, do things for your health. There's a lot of things you should be able to do with your HSA. So I would expand HSAs and let you buy your insurance through a cooperative like Amazon or Costco.
Yeah, and that's great ideas. It's in 10 seconds. Are you confident that the GOP is going to be able to come up with a better plan than Obamacare was? Because that's a big vulnerability politically.
Well, I've been communicating with President Trump over this, and he just recently put something out on social media indicating that he may well be receptive to my association health plan. So we're going to try to work with the president and see if we can get this done.
Okay, Senator Rand Paul, good conversation. Thank you, sir. You know, everybody's reporting the same stories, the same spin. You turn the channel, it's always the same. But not us. We're different. We report the real news. No spin, just the facts. Turn to us, and you won't turn back.
Tune in to Rob Schmitt tonight on Newsmax.